More than 50% of middle managers are reported to be suffering with burnout. Burnout is an epidemic of the modern workplace, and in today's video I'm going to show you a 6-part protocol that you can implement over a 12-week period to protect yourself from burnout in a management position and enable yourself to thrive in and out of the workplace. My name's Mike Jones. I'm the founder of a multi-award winning leadership and management consultancy called Better Happy and the author of a best-selling Amazon book, The Happy Business Revolution. Over the past 3 years, I've helped hundreds of managers from small businesses to some of the largest employers in the UK be able to get better results in the workplace and in their personal lives whilst offsetting the risk of burnout. And what I want to share with you in today's video is 6 of the most important lessons that I have realized help people overcome this issue. But before we get there, let me tell you a little bit about how I learned about burnout. So my experience with burnout is that before I started my first business, I served in the military for 5 years. I did 2 tours of Afghanistan. I then traveled for 3 years. I lived on monasteries, I meditated, I lived with monks. I worked on deep sea fishing boats and pulled 20 hours a day shifts sometimes for 3 months at a time. So I had all of these experiences with work, with hard work, and never for a moment had any issue with burnout until I started my own business. And when I started my own business, for me, really, that was me jumping into my leadership and management position. And I started my business, and over a 5-year period, I went from never experiencing burnout before in my life to being completely burnt out and completely depressed. And what I realized at the end of that experience was that the reason for that burnout was me and my mindset. Because if I'd been stressed in a job before, I could always point the finger at somebody and blame somebody else. But when it was my business and I was in control, ultimately I knew it was only me that was responsible for that experience. So that led to me leaving that business as COVID came about. And it led to me going through a period of internal reflection and thinking about what did I do that led to me feeling like that. And I found myself in a funny place after closing my first business. And this was where I was in a place where I was nervous about going back into business because I didn't want to put myself through the experience of burnout again. I didn't want to put myself in the position where I was stressed about my goals, neglecting my health, neglecting my relationships, and neglecting my personal life. But I also knew that if I didn't carry on pursuing my goals and I just settled for something less, that I would feel more comfortable in the short term, but in the medium to long term, I'd feel unfulfilled and disappointed in myself. And what I see with a lot of managers and business owners, but what I see with a lot of managers in particular, is that we get to these more senior positions because we're really good at what we do. We get recognition, we get promoted, and then we find ourselves in these new positions stressed, struggling to get the same results that we used to before we got to management. And we think to ourselves, would I be better off just going back to what I was doing before? And I think that's a travesty when that happens, because if you're good at what you do, the world wants you to be in a management and leadership position, because when you're in a management and leadership position, you can leverage your skills, you can inspire others, and we can make our businesses and our teams better by sharing with the wider team the unique way in which we do things and our unique attitude. And that's what the world wants from us. So what needs to happen is we don't need to step back. We need to figure out how to thrive in that position. And what I'm going to share with you today is those 6 tips that will help you do that, and some really good stories and insights to help you resonate with why these tips are important and make it easy for you to implement them into your life. So let's look at the 6-step protocol. You don't necessarily have to go through it in any particular order, but I'm presenting it to you in the order which I believe is most logical and going to be of the most benefit to you. Now, you'll notice at the top here we have something called changing gears. So this is talking about how we're now in a new position and we need to have a new approach to the way that we work. And this comes down to the old saying that what got you here won't get you there. Then we need to go into planning, which obviously I'm going to go into more detail on each of these sections, and which is all about a shifting from busyness to effectiveness. Then we need to go into our capacity planning. This is understanding the capacity of ourselves and of our team. Then we look at being a scientist. So this is embracing the mindset of measuring what matters, and you'll see why that's important in a moment. Really importantly, the next stage along is developing a level of comfort with conflict, which is something many of us have never had to do before we get ourselves into leadership and management positions. And then finally, the art of engaging a team and leveraging a team through engagement. So that is the 6-step protocol. Just very briefly, before we jump into that protocol and break each step down for you in a little bit more detail, I just want to have a little brief chat about why burnout happens and why most of the common wisdom and conventional solutions are incorrect. So if any of us have suffered with burnout or we're suffering with it now, we go on the internet and we're going to read different things. And commonly the solution, what we're going to be told the solution is better work-life balance, exercise more, eat better foods, get more sleep, go and do more training, spend more time with your family. All of these things we're told are going to fix our burnout. And it's a really short-sighted understanding of why burnout happens. And what you need to understand is that when you're not spending time with your family, you're working too much, you're letting your work take over your life, you're not looking after your health, you're eating processed foods, you're constantly rushing, so you're not making time for these things. Those behaviors are a symptom. They're not the cause of the burnout. And addressing the symptoms won't fix the burnout. So you can get into great shape. If you're suffering with burnout in your workplace, you can find some kind of balance where you start getting into great shape. And although that will give you a short-term benefit, if the underlying root cause of the issues prevails, the burnout won't disappear. But if we work through this 6-step protocol over a kind of 12-week period, 12 weeks is 3 months, it's a really good kind of process to work in, time frame to work in. If we work through these kind of 6 steps over about 12 weeks, we can really start to change the way that our mind is functioning so that we can really undo the root cause of burnout, which will then make it easier for us and more natural for us to start doing those things that are important, start looking after our health, start spending more time with our families without feeling a sense of guilt or like everything's going to go wrong. It's a step 1 is all about changing gears. So here we need to think about the statement, what got you here won't get you there. Now for most of us, and I'll show you the graph on the screen now, before we get to a management position or a leadership position, we get recognized and rewarded in our careers or in our businesses by working hard, by being busy, by being reactive and dealing with whatever gets thrown at us. And that does us well. And if we're honest with ourselves, we quite like that way of working. We get these little dopamine hits every time we get something done. We feel good about ourselves. Now, the problem is that when you go into management or leadership, if you keep trying to get results with that attitude, it's not going to work for you. So what's going to happen is when you're in management or leadership, the whole nature of that role is that your job is now to leverage your team. Now, you still might need to work, but you need to leverage a team. That's why it's called leadership. That's why it's called management. So if our way of doing that is just by being busy, we're not going to create a very good environment for our team. We're not going to be able to hack into leverage. We're not going to get the most out of people, and we're going to very quickly fall short. If we say yes to everything, we're going to overload ourselves, we're going to overload our team, we're going to create a culture of stress and busyness over a culture of effectiveness. Not only is that going to stress you out, it's going to stress your team out, and because you're so busy being reactive, your team's going to get disengaged because you've got no time for them because you're too busy trying to react to everything that comes your way. So it's very natural for managers and leaders, new managers and new leaders, to carry on working in that way. And it's understandable because that's what's worked for you in the past. But you have to recognize now you're in this position that that is not what the world wants from you anymore. You have proven yourself as being very good at what you do. And the fact that you've been promoted to management or leadership is a indirect statement that now, instead of you just being busy doing what you've always done, we want you to empower others to do what you've done. So you've got to start to feel comfortable, and this won't happen without practice, taking your foot off the gas, slowing down and spending time on things like planning, spending time thinking about what projects are on, what the strategy of the business is, and spending time with your team. This is going to feel very difficult for you at the start because you're going to feel like you should be busy. You're going to feel guilty about not being busy and not responding to everything when it comes your way. But over time, as you realize that by slowing down and taking the time on these things, you get better results, you will feel more comfortable with it. And what that also leads to is your mind realizing that your value now isn't from being busy, it's from being effective. And this is beautiful because this means that you start to realize you've got time to have a life, to go and train, to spend time with your family, to switch off in the evenings, which is a really important thing to realize because most people don't make this change. They go into management and they feel like on leadership and they just feel like it's this constant stress and overwhelm. Whereas once you realize that it's all about leverage and it's not about you being busy, you can actually get better results in less time and have more time for yourself than you did in a job. And that's when you're onto the kind of winner where you're like, okay, I'm getting better results, I'm leveraging a team, and I've got more time for myself. So management's kind of like, and leadership are kind of like these two extremes. It's either something that really benefits you, or it's going to be something that crushes you. And if you don't go through this mindset shift of my value is now in leverage and being strategic versus being busy, you're going to fall into the burnout zone. Whereas if you do figure it out and you do go through this shift, which isn't going to be easy, you're going to come up into the thriving zone. What I will say is that something I realized is that burnout is a form of laziness, which sounds really counterintuitive, but I realized this after my experience with my first business. And it is, in all honesty, I preferred being busy and being reactive and dealing with the day-to-day. I found that easier than going through this difficult shift of being more strategic, slowing down, prioritizing, spending time with my team. I didn't want to do it. I stayed in those old habits, and over time that grinded me down. Whereas if I developed the discipline to become more strategic, that would have led to me and the business thriving more. So this leads neatly onto Q2 planning. So if you haven't heard of Q2, if that doesn't mean anything to you, I don't mean quarter two, as in the second part of the year. I'm relating it to the Covey time matrix. So Stephen Covey very famously did a time management matrix, and he did 4 quarters. And on the axis on the left, he talks about important and non-important. So important things go at the top, non-important things go at the bottom. And on the top left to the top right, he goes urgent and non-urgent. So Q1, top left, is important and urgent. Okay, and these are things that need to be done right away. But Q2 is important but not urgent. So for example, not talking about work, that's our health and our fitness. Okay, if we're not injured and we're not sick, our health is important, but it's not urgent because we're not hurting at the moment. Now at work, this might be that project, this might be that new thing that you need to build to improve the efficiency of the team or your department's outcome before the end of next year. So it's something that's going to make you look great if you do it, but in reality, you've probably got plenty of emails sat waiting for you and things that you can respond to now that sit into Q1. I'm not going to talk about Q3 and Q4. These are things that are not important. So for us as managers and for us as leaders, we need to get really comfortable moving into Q2 activities. If you don't make time for planning and time for stepping back from the day-to-day and time from being busy, you're never going to have time for Q2 activities. And this is where you have to develop that ability to not respond to your emails all day, every day. And one of the things that I do with any of the managers that I work with is get them into the habit, or leaders, get them into the habit of planning in their diaries at least once a week, half a day where they are uncontactable. That's no emails, no phone calls, no popping your head into the office and asking me questions. Unless it's an absolute emergency, I am out of reach for that half an hour, and in that half day you're going to spend time on planning. Now what's going to happen is, and you're probably thinking to this as you're listening to me now, I wouldn't even know what to do in that time. But as we start to get better at understanding the strategy of the business and doing the other planning and creating objectives, etc., and looking at the numbers, which we'll talk about on step 3 of this protocol of 4, as we start to do that stuff better, that Q2 time is going to become filled up very quickly for us. So this is really your time for projects, for making stuff happen, for thinking about what's working, what's not working, and becoming more efficient. We do have a productivity planner, which is best practice of how to break your week down and what you need to plan in to be an effective leader or manager. It's just done for you. It's a really simple, effective guide. I'll put that in the notes below this video for you to download. I would highly recommend for you as a leader or manager, download that and start following it today. You're going to have this part of your mind that tries to talk you out of it, that's telling you, no, you should be busy doing other stuff. This can be done next week or next month. You've got to put that voice to the side, because if you don't do this, you're going to get burnt out and you're not going to get the results that you deserve to get. So Q2 planning, we need to plan at least half a day a week for us to just step away from the business and focus on tasks that are important and not urgent. Now, depending on the role that you're in within the business, it might dictate how much of this there is. So if you're in a highly operational business, let's say you're the manager of a restaurant, perhaps there's less need for you to do this Q2 planning because your job is just to turn up on shift and keep the team motivated. If you're in a more creative business or you're in a more strategic role, which is a lot of us, then you're going to have much more focus for this Q2 time. So it is worth you thinking about how reactive is your role within the business. And generally speaking, if you're in a highly operational part of the business and you're a manager over there, you might not need this as much, but anybody else that's more in kind of head office or a strategic part of the business or in a leadership role, this is going to be very important. Okay, next on to capacity planning then. So it's essential for you as a manager or a leader to have a really good understanding of what not only your capacity is, but the capacity of your team. And again, this takes time. It takes time for you to communicate with your team, to look at diaries, to look at what projects are on, and to try and figure out, knowing that you're not going to be able to figure out exactly, but try and figure out how much time needs to be committed to the different things that are going on. Now, this is effort, but the reason that this is so important is that once you understand capacity, then you can understand what you can and can't say yes to. What happens with most managers in most businesses is they don't have a good, clear understanding of not only their own capacity, but their team's capacity. And because we want to do a good job and because we're passionate, we say yes to too much. And when we say yes to too much, we stress ourselves out, we stress our teams out, and we reduce our ability to do a good job because we only have so much capacity. One of the common errors that I see, or common issues that I see, is managers say yes to too much and then they make up for that by working in their personal time, or what I call volunteering for their company for free. So it's really important that you take time, and again, this can be part of your Q2 planning, that you take time to understand the capacity, to think about the projects that your team are focused on, and to think about how much time is committed to those projects. Something that I like to do with the managers and leaders that I work with is get 3 months of your calendar up and plan out all of the fixed events that you're committed to. Then plan out your holidays, your time off, and then put in your working hours, any kind of recurring things that you have, so like leadership meetings, etc. Any of that, plot it in, and then that shows you how much time you've got left. Next thing you do, what projects are we already committed to, and then it will give you a more realistic insight as to how much time you've realistically got available to you. Now, if it comes along that you don't have enough time to do the things that you want to commit to, then that will highlight the issue that you need to get better at prioritizing and maybe dropping some projects to take on the others. But if you don't understand your capacity and the capacity of your team, I almost guarantee you're just going to say yes to too much, and you're going to be stressed, and so are your team. Okay, so this then leads us on to being a scientist. And again, this is something that we don't have to do before leadership and management positions typically, but it's something that becomes important as we get into those positions. And there's two things that are essential for you to measure when you're in a leadership and management role. Now, you can get away with not measuring this stuff and you can still be effective and get results, but when you don't measure these things, busyness becomes the measure of effectiveness. So instead of looking at how well we're doing and how much progress we've made, all we do is put an emphasis on busyness. And this is where people start to think they need to stay and work the latest and who can work the longest, and all of this starts to get promoted over who's actually getting results. Another negative of not measuring is that you aren't able to see and celebrate all of the things that you and your team are achieving. And this is really bad for motivation and engagement, because there's always new things that you need to fix. There's always new projects that get thrown up. There's always problems that need fixing. And when you don't measure your projects and your growth and your KPIs, you're not able to focus on the growth. You're just able to focus on what's wrong, and there's always stuff wrong. So it makes work feel quite stressful and makes teams and people feel unappreciated, you as well. So what you need to do is you need to get into the habit of measuring two things. Everybody, and this is at a team level, you as an individual and everyone within your team should have at least 3 KPIs. And I say at least, at most 3 KPIs to keep it simple. So everybody should have 3 KPIs, and your KPIs tell you how well you're doing the day-to-day. So these are established tasks that you're expected to do, and the measures are the acceptable ranges in which you perform within them. So my partner runs a training team, so their KPIs are delivering a certain amount of sessions, having a certain amount of people attend those sessions, and having a certain level of satisfaction scores from the people that have attended those sessions. So that's the day-to-day. Are my trainers doing the sessions? Are we getting the bums on seats? And are the people that are doing those training sessions getting value from them? So that's 3 KPIs. That's the day-to-day. And every role within any business can have these. Now, a lot of managers and leaders fear doing this, and business owners fear doing this because I think it's going to put pressure on people. That's a mistake. So it's not going to it will put pressure on people, but you can guide them to, if you create the right culture and you work with them and you create a healthy relationship, they're going to see it more as a coaching relationship versus a stressful relationship. But if people don't have KPIs, here's what happens. People don't know when they're doing a good job, but even more importantly, people that aren't doing a good job get away with it, and then your people that are doing a good job will start to think, what's the point in me performing well? Because the people that aren't performing well, nothing's getting addressed. So that's a really kind of important area for you to focus on, because if you don't, you're going to create the wrong kind of culture. Now, the second thing that you should measure is something that I call objectives, key results. So this is your growth measures. So all businesses and all teams should have KPIs, which is the day-to-day. But most teams and most businesses and most people have things that they need to improve. There's very few teams where they don't want to improve efficiency or improve performance. And the way that we measure this is through our objectives. The objective is the statement, like we want to improve efficiency in the training team. And then the key results are how we're measuring the success of that. And every team, in my opinion, should have 3 objectives with 3 key results for each objective. And what this does is it means you're very clear on your projects that you're trying to focus on to improve things within the business or the team, and you've got measures so you know if it's being successful. Now, the reality is you're never going to achieve 100% of your key results, and that's absolutely fine. What's important is that you create a culture where we get clear on the things that we want to improve, we get clear on the key results so we know how to measure it if we're doing it or not, and then we create a culture where it's okay if we're not hitting them as long as we're figuring out why and supporting each other to get there. When you do these 2 things well, when you measure your KPIs and your OKRs, you're measuring day-to-day. So are we doing the day-to-day as it should be done? And are we measuring growth? And what that does is it takes the pressure off you as a manager or leader to constantly trying to think about this stuff and justify if people are doing their jobs in your head. So it systemizes growth and it systemizes performance. Number 5 then, comfort in conflict. For many of us, we have a fear of conflict. It's a very human thing to want to avoid conflict, because when we were hunter-gatherers, which was most of our time on this planet, conflict often meant death. It meant fighting and then death. So our brains will do all that they can to try and talk us out of conflict and justify avoiding it. And what happens for many of us is we've been able to steer free of and clear of conflict for most of our lives, especially for our adult lives, in our careers, until we get to a management and leadership position. And once you're in a management and leadership position, if you don't develop comfort with conflict, you're going to very quickly come unstuck. You're going to have some serious issues. You're not going to be able to get things done, and it's going to bite you on the arse. So we've got to develop comfort with this. And the way that we do that is by doing it. We've got to force ourselves to have these little micro conflicts. And we've also got to reposition conflict in our head. We often, especially in modern society, we're taught that conflict is bad and it should be avoided at all costs. But conflict is essential, especially in leadership and management, because in leadership and management, your job is to make sure that everybody's clear on where we're heading, and to make sure everybody's clear on what success looks like, and then to hold people accountable to that. And if they're not achieving it, our job is to either help them or to move them on into a different role or to a different business. And it's as simple as that. We can't avoid that. So if people aren't performing, for example, or people are displaying behaviors that aren't aligned to our values in our team, and we're not confident to address that, it's going to create a terrible culture in your management, in your team, and it's going to make you feel really unhappy over the long term. So you have to develop this confidence to lean into your conflict, and the best way to do this is to just lean into it. So you've got to frame it into your mind that it's okay, that it's essential, that it's important, and you've got to lean into it and practice it. Because what happens is once you have these conflicts over time, the more and more of them that you have, the more you realize that the outcome isn't as severe as what your mind is trying to tell you. So your mind will tell you a horror story about how if you have this difficult conversation with this person, they're going to want to have a fight with you, they're going to go crazy, you're going to lose your job, everybody's going to hate you, you'll end up homeless and on the streets. This is what the mind does, and it's creating this terrible, over-the-top horror story to try and talk you out of the conflict, to try and protect you from engaging in a conflict, which historically meant death, but in the modern age normally just means a little bit of maybe raised voices, a little bit of raised heart rates, and then people getting back to normal and back on with it. And something that also helps me and helps the managers that I work with is to decatastrophize. So if you're really struggling with this, if you're a really anxious person and you really hate conflict, look at the worst case scenario of what will happen if you do this, or potential worst case scenario, and if you don't. And normally what we'll see is that if we don't, we're going to end up really unhappy, really miserable, the business isn't going to perform, and people are going to start to get fed up. That's what's going to happen if we don't address it. And if we do address it, normally the worst thing that's going to happen is we might get shouted at. And if this person is, let's say it's the very, very worst case, and this person is a particularly aggressive person, and we're worried that if we address it, then we're going to be verbally or physically assaulted, then we can make sure that we can put measures in place to address that. Obviously that should never happen, and if this is that kind of person, then we don't want them in the business anyway, but we can put measures in place to protect ourselves from that perceived risk. such as doing it in a public space, having people around us, recording, etc., etc. So you've got to develop comfort with conflict. And my key takeaway for you is try and think about, are you avoiding conflict, and how's that affecting your ability to manage and ability to lead? Getting over this and pushing yourself is probably one of the most enriching things that you can do to enjoy your role and to not feel stressed at work. And then finally, team engagement. So learning how to leverage your team by engaging them. So again, before we get to leadership management, we're normally pretty good at doing our jobs ourselves, and we know kind of the way of doing things that's effective. And what often happens when we get into leadership management is we just wish that everybody thought like us and acted like us, but that's not how it works. You've got to be able to tap into human psychology, and something that can really help you understand this is a diagram called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I'll flash up on the screen now. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs shows us that at the very bottom two rungs, the way that we can kind of motivate people is by giving them their basic needs. So for a career, that's paying them and giving them a bit of job security. Now, historically, when there was a lot of mass unemployment and a lot of poverty, that's all you needed to do in a job. You needed to pay people and give them work and tell them what to do, and they'd appreciate it, they'd get on with it, and they'd do a good job, and they'd stick around. And that's because the alternative was being unemployed and in poverty. Today, this is very different. In 2021, the BBC reported that for the first time since records began, there were more job vacancies than unemployed people. And although we still have issues in our society and our economy, generally speaking, the quality of life has improved significantly, and more people are working because they want to, not because they have to. Of course, we've still got bills to pay, and of course, there's still struggles, but a lot of people, even if they didn't work, can still get by. So what that means is now that we can't just rely on those two bottom rungs of the ladder of Maslow's hierarchy of needs to motivate people. We've got to tap into these higher psychological needs, and this is people want to feel a sense of belonging, they want to feel confident in themselves and like they're developing and like they're growing, and ultimately they want to be the best versions of themselves. So if you can tap into those three things, you're going to have a really engaged team that want to go above and beyond for you and make your team a success and support you in your career. And really the way in which we do this is we spend time with our team. And I would say the minimum is a 60 to 90 minute meeting once a week where we give them an update on what's going on. We tap into the wins for the week, and we also think about what do we need to achieve and how's that being measured. And then every quarter, so every 12 weeks, you have a full day with your team where you look at the kind of long-term strategy of the business and break that down into goals for the next quarter, and make sure that you get your team involved in that. Now, if you supplement this with a quarterly personal development plan, this is you spending about 40 to 60 minutes with each team member once every 12 weeks to find out about their personal goals and their professional goals. You're going to have a super engaged team, and you're going to be doing 90% more than most businesses. So if you do those two things, if you spend time with your team and you do their PDPs and you develop them, you're going to get an engaged team. And when you get an engaged team, your job as a leader or manager is going to get way easier. This engaging the team piece seems obvious, so why don't all managers do it? Why is it so rare for this to be done? And it returns us back to the first point on the circle, which is we're too busy being busy. We think that our value in the team is still us being busy and showing them how it's done. So it all links to each other, right? We've got to develop this confidence to not just be busy all the time. We've got to see that our value is in leveraging people and empowering people and driving the team forwards. And then we've got to set aside the time for that so that we can bring the best out of our teams whilst achieving the business goals. And that not only frees us up and helps us avoid burnout, but actually creates an environment where our team not only work hard, but enjoy working hard. So that's the 6-step protocol, and I want you to focus on this over the next 12 weeks. And there's a few tools that I can put in the link to the video that are going to help you achieve that. So what's going to be of particular importance to you is the proactivity planner, and I'll also put in our free training link for the PDP, which shows you how to run a PDP step by step, and it gives you more in-depth training on what I talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I just want to wrap up by saying that it makes absolutely no sense for you to sacrifice your health and your happiness for your job or for your business. Even if it's your business and you get your livelihood from it, it makes no sense to do that. And so many of us, and I did this in my first business, and I realize the error of my ways now, but I didn't at the time. So many of us tell ourselves that if we work really hard and get results, then we can be happy. And it doesn't work, okay? It really doesn't work. And what's the point in getting results if you sacrifice the things that are most important to you, like your health and your relationships and your personal life, in order to get those results? If you do that, you're just going to feel empty once you achieve those results anyway. So reframe that way of thinking, and the way you've got to think is, if I focus on being happy and healthy and having balance, then I'm going to be able to work really hard more consistently, which is going to lead to me getting results. So I think we're trained by society to put our careers and other people ahead of ourselves, and that leads to so many issues. What we've got to think about is being sensibly selfish. Put yourself first so you can be of most service to those that you work with, to your team, and to your business for the long term. I hope you found this useful. Please make sure to like, subscribe and share if you have, and keep up to date with new videos that are coming out. If you'd like to see anything different, or you've got any particular questions that you'd like me to address, please do put them in the comments.